They used to call me the star of the kitchen. For 10 years, my dishes brought this restaurant fame, respect, and money. But one day everything collapsed. I was dragged into the manager's office, and without a single explanation, a folder was thrown onto the table. Inside, the results of an analysis. My food, poisoned. "You've ruined us," the manager spat, his voice trembling with fury. "You're finished?" The words felt like knives. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and yet I couldn't speak. Because in that moment I realized something far worse than the accusation itself. Someone wanted me gone. Someone had planted this. As I walked out of the restaurant, the kitchen staff avoided my eyes. The same chefs who once admired me, who learned from me, now looked at me as if I were a criminal. The street outside felt colder than ever before. My reputation, my career, my life, all stolen in one day. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly. No, I was going to find out who did this. And when I did, they'd regret ever stepping into my kitchen. I spent the rest of the day wandering the city like a ghost. Every corner of the streets reminded me of the life I had built, the long nights perfecting recipes, the fire in the kitchen that once felt like home. Now all I could see was betrayal. Back in my small apartment, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in silence. The questions tore through my mind. Who would do this? Who hated me enough to destroy everything I worked for? I replayed the last week in my head. The tension in the kitchen, the sideways glances, the sudden arrival of a new supplier whose spices I had barely touched. And then one image stuck with me, Victor, the sous chef. Always smiling, always eager to please, but there was something in his eyes, envy. He had always wanted the spotlight. But it couldn't just be him. Poisoning food was too extreme, too reckless. This was bigger. The phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Now you know what it feels like to be powerless." My hand froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just about jealousy. This was personal. Someone out there wanted me broken. I clenched my fist around the phone. "Whoever you are, you made one mistake." My voice trembled, but not with fear, with rage. "You didn't finish me." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, scribbling names, connections, motives. I was a chef, but now I felt like a detective in my own story. And I knew one thing for certain. The game had just begun. The next morning I put on a plain jacket and cap, the kind no one would notice. I hadn't stepped near the restaurant since they threw me out like a criminal, but today I wasn't going as their chef. I was going as a ghost. The restaurant was buzzing as always. Guests laughed at their tables, waiters danced around with trays of wine and perfectly plated meals. From a distance, it almost looked like nothing had changed. Except for me. I took a seat at the far corner, where the shadows from the wine racks stretched across the floor. The waiter didn't recognize me, or pretended not to. That stung, but I bit it back. Then I saw him. Victor. My sous chef. Standing proudly at the pass, barking orders, his chest puffed as if he had been born to lead. My stomach twisted. The man who had once carried my knives now carried my title. When my food arrived, I didn't touch it. My eyes stayed on the kitchen. And that's when I noticed something strange. A man I didn't know slipped through the side entrance carrying a small case. Not a delivery man. Not a supplier. And yet the staff didn't stop him. He went straight into the back. What the hell was that? I left some cash on the table and slipped out. Around the corner by the back alley I waited. The door creaked open and the stranger walked out, still carrying his case, now lighter. He looked around once, then got into a sleek black car and drove off. I memorized the license plate. Something was happening inside my old kitchen. Deals in the shadows, strangers with cases, and my name dragged through the mud. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the car just as it disappeared down the street. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt a flicker of control. All right, I whispered to myself. If they think I'm finished, they're about to learn what a desperate man can do. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the scene. The man with the case, the look of familiarity between him and the kitchen staff, the way Victor strutted as though he owned my world now. By sunrise I was already outside. My notebook lay open on the table, the license plate number staring back at me. I had spent hours tracing it online, digging through half-legal databases, calling in favors from old friends who owed me. And I found him. The car was registered to a private supplier. Not a food distributor, not a cleaning company, nothing remotely connected to a restaurant. The name was a shell company. A fake. My gut twisted again. Someone had built a whole facade just to slip in and out of my kitchen unnoticed. I followed the trail across the city. To an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the docks. The building looked dead, its walls peeling, windows cracked. But behind those broken panes I saw light. I parked my beat-up car 2 blocks away and approached on foot. My heart pounded with each step. The air smelled of salt and rust, the low hum of generators leaking from inside. I crouched near a side window, peering in. What I saw nearly stopped my breath. Inside, boxes stacked high, not food, not wine, but chemicals. Dangerous ones. The kind that never belonged anywhere near a restaurant. And right there, at a table in the middle of it all, sat Victor. My sous chef. My friend. My betrayer. He wasn't alone. Across from him sat the man with the case. They were talking, laughing, signing papers. Money exchanged hands. My fists clenched. The poison. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't even been about me. They were running something bigger, smuggling chemicals, laundering through the restaurant, and I had been the perfect scapegoat. My jaw tightened as I whispered to myself. They destroyed my name to protect their empire. I stepped back into the shadows, my heart racing. I couldn't confront them yet, not without proof. But now I had a direction. I had a fire. And if they thought they could erase me so easily, they hadn't seen me fight yet. The city never felt so cold. Every streetlight, every car that passed made me feel like someone was watching. But I couldn't stop now. For 3 nights in a row, I returned to the warehouse. I kept my distance, blending into the shadows. I saw trucks coming and going at odd hours, unloading barrels with hazard symbols, stamping fake food distributor labels on them before shipping them back out. It was a full operation. And the restaurant where I had built my reputation, my second home, was just their cover. The betrayal cut deeper each time I thought about it. All those years of sweat, of staying late, of perfecting every plate. I wasn't just a chef to them. I was a mask. Something they could use until they didn't need me anymore. So I adapted. I bought a cheap camera with night vision. Hid near the loading dock. Took photo after photo. Victor signing receipts, workers unloading the barrels, the same mysterious man supervising it all. Each click of the shutter was a nail in their coffin. But photos weren't enough. I needed something that screamed undeniable. On the 4th night I got my chance. One of the trucks stalled outside the warehouse, its driver cursing under his breath as he struggled with the engine. The back door hung slightly open, just enough for me to slip closer. I glanced around, no eyes on me. My heart thundered in my ears as I pushed the door open a few more inches. Inside, stacked neatly, were containers. Some labeled wine, others spices. But I could smell it. Acrid, sharp chemical. I pulled out a small vial I'd brought, dipped it against one leaking barrel, sealed it, and tucked it into my jacket. Proof. Real proof. Suddenly, "Hey!" The shout froze me. My blood ran cold. A flashlight beam cut across the alley, landing on me. One of the guards. "Who the hell are you?" I didn't think. I ran. Sprinting down the alley, footsteps pounding behind me. The sound of the guard shouting into a radio sent adrenaline flooding my veins. By the time I reached my car, I was gasping for air. I slammed the door shut, started the engine, and tore out into the night, the headlights of another car flashing in my rearview mirror. I had the evidence. But now they knew someone was watching. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was survival. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Victor, the owner, the man in the shadows. Laughing. Using me. Throwing me away like I was nothing. But I wasn't nothing. The vial of poison I'd taken burned in my pocket like fire. I had proof. Enough to bring them down. But then the doubt started creeping in. What if the police were on their payroll? What if I handed this over and it just disappeared? Worse, what if they came after me after my family? No. I couldn't trust anyone. So I began planning my own way. First I studied them. Day after day, night after night, I followed their routines. Who came to the warehouse? When they left? Who they met with? Patterns emerged, the same faces, the same schedules. And one detail that gave me a cruel kind of hope. They weren't invincible. Victor, for example, always left the warehouse at midnight. Alone. Always taking the same shortcut through the industrial district. The owner, Mr. Grant, had a driver, but every Friday he stopped at a private club. Always the same time, always the same place. Even the shadowy man, he was careful but not careful enough. He liked his cigars. He always smoked on the balcony of a high-rise suite, same hour every night. One by one I saw their weaknesses. And I started to think, maybe I wasn't just going to expose them. Maybe I was going to destroy them. I converted my small apartment into a war room. Notes, photos, maps pinned across the walls. Red strings connecting faces, places, dates. A chessboard of betrayal. I trained my body like I hadn't in years. Early morning runs. Late night push-ups. Even holding my breath underwater in the tub, forcing myself to stay calm under pressure. Because I knew what was coming, and I had to be ready. Every day I looked at their pictures and whispered the same words. You stole my life. Now I'll take yours apart piece by piece. And for the first time since they framed me, I smiled. Because revenge wasn't just an idea anymore. It had become a plan. The first strike had to be perfect. Clean. Silent. If I failed, they'd know I was coming. And then I'd be finished. So I chose Victor. The weakest link. The one who had gloated the most when they ruined me. For 3 nights, I followed him, keeping my distance, learning every step of his midnight route. He always stopped at the same gas station, bought the same pack of cigarettes, then drove through the same dark industrial road. Predictable. Arrogant. That arrogance would kill him. I prepared everything, gloves, mask, a crowbar wrapped in cloth. Not to kill him right away, but to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. They couldn't suspect me. Not yet. That night, my pulse was calm. No fear. Only fire. I waited in the shadows near the rusted shipping containers. The hum of Victor's engine echoed closer. Headlights cut through the fog, and then, the car stopped exactly where I knew it would. He stepped out, cigarette between his lips, muttering into his phone. I moved fast. One strike across the jaw, he dropped. I dragged him behind the containers before he even knew what happened. When his eyes opened, they widened. Recognition. Terror. You. He tried to spit the words, but my hand silenced him. I leaned close. My voice was steady, deadly calm. You thought you buried me. But I'm still here. And now it's your turn to disappear. He begged. He promised money, information, even protection. But I didn't want his bargains. I wanted justice. My justice. By the time I was finished, Victor would never betray anyone again. And when they found him the next morning, the police would call it a random attack. Just another body in the city's shadows. But I knew better. It was my first move. And the board had only just opened. Victor's silence gave me strength. But I knew he was only the first domino. The restaurant still thrived even without me. Every night, crowds filled its polished halls, laughing, drinking, posting pictures of the most exquisite food in the city. Food made by the same hands that had betrayed me. I stood across the street one evening, hood pulled low, watching them all pour inside. It made my blood boil. My creations, my techniques, stolen. My name, erased. But I would carve it back into their memory. With fire. The next target was Marina, the sous chef who had once stood beside me in the kitchen. She was supposed to be my ally, but she sold me out the fastest. She had smiled in my face while slipping knives into my back. I learned her schedule. She loved attention, always posting where she was. Wine bars, fashion shows, late-night jazz clubs. Easy prey. One night, I followed her into a dimly lit parking garage. Her heels clicked on the concrete, echoing like a countdown. Marina, I called out. She froze, turned, and her face went pale when she saw me. No, it can't be. You're finished. You're dead? I stepped closer, the shadows swallowing us both. You wish. She stumbled back, stuttering excuses, claiming she had no choice. But her fear only fueled me. You poisoned my name, I growled. Now I poison yours. I didn't kill her. Not yet. That would be too merciful. Instead, I exposed her. Within days, every major food critic in the city received anonymous files. Videos, receipts, recordings I had dug up showing how Marina had stolen recipes, sabotaged rivals, even lied about her training. Her reputation collapsed in flames. She was blacklisted overnight. And as I watched her crumble, I realized something. Death wasn't the only revenge. Sometimes watching them rot alive was sweeter. But the deeper I went, the closer I came to the real architect of my downfall, the owner. The man in the tailored suit who smiled while destroying me. He was next. Weeks turned into months. Everyone who had conspired against me had already felt my hand. Some were disgraced, some broken, some vanished. But one enemy remained, the owner of the restaurant, Mr. Lavrov. A man in an expensive suit, smiling in newspapers, giving interviews, talking about the purity of taste. He had made my downfall his victory. I wasn't going to let him live peacefully. The city was preparing for a grand gastronomic event, the award ceremony for the best restaurants. Of course, that restaurant was among the favorites. I slipped inside not like a shadow but openly, in a suit with a forged badge. No one even recognized me. I was different now, thinner, my eyes darker. Lavrov sat at the table, basking in attention, a glass of wine glowing in his hand. His chefs served dishes I had once created. People applauded. When he stepped on stage to receive the award, I stepped up too. And right there, before the whole hall, I said, "You are applauding a thief. This man destroyed my name, framed me, and now he sells you my recipes, my ideas, my soul. Tonight, everyone will know the truth." The spotlight burned into my eyes, cameras caught my every move. People laughed at first, thinking it was a show. But then I threw the video on the screen, documents, recordings, undeniable evidence. The hall went silent. Lavrov turned pale. He tried to say something, but it was too late. His empire was collapsing live in front of everyone. That night I didn't run. I sat in a bar across the street, drinking cheap whiskey, watching journalists swarm the restaurant building. People poured out screaming, employees fled. My name was spoken again. But now, as a symbol of truth, I had taken back what was mine, and stripped them of what was theirs. Revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about making the world see who they really are. I stepped out into the night, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. This was my final dish. And it tasted perfect.